Hello, my name is Isabel Alkoff. I'll be interviewing Mr. Fred Stern today in Cinnaminson, New Jersey. The date's August 7th, 2023. Could you see that? Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself and your date of birth and your address, please?
My name is Fred Stern. I was born on July 14, 1928, which makes me 95 now.
Okay, and can you tell me where you were born?
I was born in Germany in a small town called Bigge in Westphalia.
Can you spell Bigge for us?
B-I-G-G-E.
Okay, and you live there with your family? And can you describe your family, please?
Yes, I lived there with my family, my parents, a younger brother, an uncle and aunt and cousin. We had a business in Bigge for many hundreds of years, at a meat market, until we left Germany in 1938.
Can you tell me your parents' names?
My father's name is Albert Stern. My mother's name is Erna. Her maiden name is Metzger, Metzger.
Okay, and how many siblings did you have?
I had one brother. In German, his name was Helmut, and here he was changed to Herbert.
Okay, and what year was he born?
He was born in 1931.
All right, and did you attend a school in Bigge?
Yes, I attended the elementary school in Bigge until we left, or until it was no longer safe for me to go to school.
Can you tell us why it was not safe to go to school?
Yeah, after the Hitler movement got rooted in Bigge, the teachers were replaced by Nazi elements. During the time that I went to school, which was during kindergarten and first grade, I was picked on by the kids. I was not hurt badly, but just physically shoved aside and ostracized with two other Jewish children in my class.
Okay, and in this class situation, how did the teacher react to you being bullied?
In the early days, the teacher was anti-Nazi, was very sympathetic to me and to the other Jewish children. But it was after she was replaced by Nazi teachers and superintendents that it was impossible for me to continue the school.
Do you know how they determined that a teacher was more sympathetic to the Nazi cause? Like, how did they choose these teachers?
I don't know how they chose the teachers, but they were just anybody that was not for the Nazi was replaced.
All right, and this new teachers, how did you know as a student that they were sympathetic?
Because they made it known that other students were not to associate with Jewish children. They noted that in the class.
They would announce that in the class?
Yes.
Okay, so after that, what did you do? Did you stay in the class?
After that, we left the school, and we started our immigration process. I might add one thing. What was it? On our 50th wedding anniversary, we went to Germany as part of our trip to Europe, and we met with the townspeople of Bigge, and I met a man there who claims that he was the only person that would sit next to me in school because I was Jewish, and I have a picture of this gentleman.
It's wonderful. All right. Can you describe your home to us?
Yes, we had a meat market, and above the meat market, we had our living quarters. I lived there with my parents, my brother, and my grandmother.
And your grandmother's name, please?
My grandmother's name was Julie Stern, maiden name Meyerhoff.
All right, and approximately, like, do you have an idea when she was born?
Oh, no, I don't know the exact date.
All right. Okay, so describe your home, how many bedrooms you had and your lifestyle. Did you live comfortably?
We had I would say, a very comfortable life. We had help in the house, had maids, and my mother and aunt worked in the store part-time. But we had a very comfortable, led a very comfortable life.
Okay.
The Stearns were in Bigger for hundreds of years, and they were well known in the community.
Did you have extended family in town also?
No, yes, I'm sorry, we did. My aunt and uncle also lived in the town. My uncle was partner in the business.
And his name was?
Julius Stern.
Okay.
And they had one son, Ernest Ludwig.
How many employees were in the meat market?
How many?
How many employees?
Oh, I don't know exactly. I would guess between the meat market, the slaughterhouse, and the sausage, I would say maybe, I don't know, maybe 10.
Okay. The slaughterhouse was a separate building?
A separate building, but close by.
Okay. Like walking distance?
Yes.
Okay. Did you own a car?
Yes.
Okay. And did you take vacations?
Yes, I have vacation with another uncle
Where would you go on vacations?
to visit my uncle and visit my maternal grandparents.
And which town were they in?
They were in a town called Dorsten
In Germany?
in Germany, Dorsten.
Okay. And what did you do when you were visiting them?
Just what kids normally do, play.
All right. And so you had your vacations. Now, what happened once the communist teacher came in and they ran the school? How was your life changed?
Well, my father and parents had made efforts already to get out of Germany. They saw what was happening from 1931 on. So 1933 was kind of a highlight that put an exclamation mark on our necessity of leaving.
What was going on in 1931? Do you have any recall of what changed?
Well, I was 3 years old.
Yeah. Okay. And in 33, were you aware of any changes?
Yeah, in 1933, the adjacent slaughterhouse, the meat and sausage factory where they made the sausages, caught fire or was set on fire. I remember that. I remember my parents getting me. We could see it from our house. My mother had my brother in her arms, and they were very nervous about possibly the fire spreading to our house. I saw my father leave the house in a hurry to open the barn to let the horse out. We had a horse. And the entire building burnt down to the ground.
Was there any attempt? Is there a fire department or somebody that was trying to put it out?
There was an attempt, yes. There was a fire department. They made an attempt to put it out, but it was not salvageable.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
Okay, and okay, so now the slaughterhouse is gone. Were you able to keep the meat market?
Yeah, what my father did, he immediately, with the house, the building was insured. He applied for insurance, and which was granted after he could verify that he was in the First World War, and then they rebuilt in 1933. So the building was rebuilt, and this was necessary for him to do in order to sell the entire business. So that was really the crowning effort to get out.
You mentioned that your father had been in World War I. Do you know who he fought for and what position he had?
Yeah, my father had 3 brothers and 4 sisters, so there's a family of 8 siblings. All 4 brothers were in the First World War in the German army. 2 of my uncles were killed in the Western Front. Another uncle, my Uncle Julius, who was in business with my father, was a junior officer in the German army, was wounded and received the Iron Cross. My father survived. My two uncles, one for which I was named Fritz, and the other one, my cousin, was named Ludwig. They were both killed on the Western Front. And I was, just this past year, I was able to find out where he was buried in France.
Where was he buried in France?
I don't know the exact town, but somewhere where the American fought the Germans in France.
All right, and so your basic job was going to school. You weren't old enough to work in the
That's right.
business and stuff. All right, did your mother work in the business?
Yes, part-time.
Yeah, do you know what she was doing there?
Oh, she waited on trade.
Okay. All right, and did you belong to a synagogue?
Oh, yes.
Can you remember the name of the synagogue?
No, I don't.
Okay. Was it an Orthodox synagogue or?
It was Orthodox.
Okay. And was your family kosher at home?
Partly. My grandmother was kosher, but my father was not.
Okay. All right, that works. So you were more assimilated and, than your mother's family.
Yes.
Or had-
Yeah, the business before my father and uncle had it was my grandfather's. Before that, it was his father's. So there was a history of the business, and there's a history of the Stern family in Bigger.
Was the meat market kosher?
Partially.
Can you explain how you become partially?
Yeah, my father could slaughter the animals kosher to serve the Jewish trade, but to the non-Jewish trade, it was not kosher.
Okay. That's very interesting indeed. So your father was doing some of the slaughtering himself.
He and the help that he had,
Yeah.
they had apprentices.
Okay. So this business, you said they rebuilt.
They rebuilt.
And it was ready to sell. Do you know when they tried to start selling it? When?
I would say right after that. I would probably, I don't know, I think in 1936 they started to really get everything finalized.
Okay.
I think 36, the business may actually have been sold.
Okay, so it had been sold in 36?
I think so.
Okay. And what did you do after the sale? Because obviously you were living above the business. Where did you live after that?
Well, until we emigrated to the United States, we lived in the same building.
Oh, you were able to stay in the building?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And were you able to go to school at this point?
No.
Okay. So you and your brother stayed home?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you read books? Did you continue your education somehow?
Yeah, with my mother, my grandmother, the home taught me, and my brother.
Mm-hmm. Did you receive religious education as well?
Yes. We had a Jewish school in town.
Okay. The Jewish school was a day school or like after school?
It wasn't after school.
Okay. So you had a Hebrew education?
It served not only the Jews of Bigger, but the surrounding area where Jews lived. They all came to the school.
Did you go to Shabbat services?
Yes.
And did your mother light candles on Friday night?
I can't remember. I'm pretty sure she probably did, but I can't remember.
All right. And did you remember Shabbat dinner in your house?
I have no recollection of that.
All right. Okay. So in 36, they sell the business, and what happens next?
Well, until we emigrated to the United States in 1938, we stayed there. We got our exit visas in 1936. Let me relate the story there that what evolved. The whole family, being my parents, my brother and I, and my grandmother, we all went to Stuttgart to get the visa to emigrate to the United States. At that time, we already had sponsors, so there was no problem with getting affidavits. So we went to the German consulate in Stuttgart, And my father, my grandmother, my mother, and myself got the visa to emigrate. They did not give a visa to my brother because he had had a prior infection on his head which had completely healed, but left a scar, and the American consulate would not grant him an exit visa. So at that point, my mother decided that she was also going to stay with my brother. And at that point, I decided that I wanted to stay with my mother. So my father and my grandmother got their exit visa. We got back on the train back to Bigger from Stuttgart. And all the way home, my parents talked to me about that it was necessary for me to also emigrate with my father and grandmother, that it was important that my mother would follow and my brother would follow at another time. So they kind of worked me over the entire trip back to Bigger, talked it over that night, and the next morning I gave in and I said yes, I would go to America with my father and my grandmother. We went back to Stuttgart and I got the exit visa. My mother and brother stayed behind, and they stayed with my maternal grandparents in Dorsten. And fortunately, they were able to go back to Stuttgart in November after Kristallnacht. And at that point, the consulate did give my brother an exit visa, and my mother followed in November of 1938.
Now,
Her parents did not.
okay, can you describe the steps that you took in your emigration from Germany to the United States?
Yeah, we went from my recollections, we went from Bigger to an uncle that lived this was a brother of my mother's, who lived in Wesel, which was close to the Dutch border. And I think we may have stayed there for a day or two, and then went to Holland, to Rotterdam, to board the boat to take us to America, the boat was called the New Amsterdam. Also, I might add that during all of this time, my parents were able to completely pack the entire house in lifts, and we were able to emigrate to the United States with all of our belongings. You were not allowed to take any money out of the country, but you could take personal belongings. So we had all of our belongings with us, including a bicycle. So we had everything packed into large crates, shipped to the United States.
Did you make a deal with your parents that if the bike went, you would go too? Okay, so do you remember anything about the trip, the voyage on the boat?
Well, we have some pictures of my trip on the boat with my grandmother and my father. I don't remember too much. I was probably nervous. I don't remember having a good time on the boat.
Okay. Do you remember if there were other children? Was there a nursery?
There were other children, but I don't ever recall playing with anybody else.
Okay.
I was probably too frightened and leaving my mother behind.
Yeah.
And my brother.
It's traumatic.
Yeah.
Did that result in any personal problems later?
No, I don't think
you
so.
were okay.
No.
Okay. And okay, so you arrive in America.
Right.
And which port did you land in?
We landed in Hoboken.
Do you know the date?
June of 1938. I don't remember the exact date. I actually have the passenger list of the boat.
Okay, so you arrive in Hoboken, New Jersey, and who's there to greet you?
Okay. My grandmother had two sisters that had emigrated to the United States in the 1800s, and they had married here, and they had families, and they were able to, through their families, get the affidavits for us. So they met us in Hoboken, and my aunt, one of my father's sisters, had arrived in the States maybe 6 months earlier, and so we lived with them for for a while until my mother arrived. They picked my mother's sister, my grandmother's sisters and husbands picked us up in Hoboken, drove us to Philadelphia to my aunt's house. And from there, we stayed there for a while until we had our own house and moved in there till my mother came.
What were your initial memories? When you got off the boat, you looked around, you saw their car. Do you remember anything from that day?
I remember being told to be careful with the cars, that the cars in America don't make as much noise as the ones in Germany. So I remember being cautioned about the automobiles here.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I couldn't speak any English, but my father had a cousin here who was a teacher, and she taught me during the summer, taught me some English, and I started to attend school in September.
Okay. How did other students react to you? This was still pre-war, so Germany wasn't the enemy at that point. Did other families make you feel welcome? Did they know that you were Jewish? How?
Well, there were other Jewish children with the same background in the school, just a few, but I don't remember any hostility, any problems.
Right. And were you writing to your mother, getting letters from your mother, or?
I don't remember writing to them, but I know we received letters. Of course, we're talking about 1938 now, so there's still an exchange.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. How long did it take for your mother to be able to come with your brother?
She came in November of that same year.
Okay. All right. And
She lived through Kristallnacht.
Did she talk about that when she came back? When
Yes.
she came to America?
Yes.
What did she say?
Just how terrible it was. The synagogue in Dorsten was burned down. And of course, she was very frightened for her parents and her siblings.
Okay. How did she feel leaving them behind?
Probably shocked, helpless, hopeless. At that time, there was no way that we could see of getting them out. They tried. Actually, two of her siblings were able to get out. One uncle went to Palestine in 1938. Her sister, her only sister, got out, I think, also in 1938, and went to Argentina by way of Montevideo, Paraguay. And her parents and other siblings remained behind.
When your mother came and you and your father were already here, where did you live? Like, what section?
Okay, we lived in a section in Philadelphia, a section called Logan, which was predominantly a Jewish section. So, and we continued to live there in a couple of different houses until 1945 or thereabouts.
Did you attend a public school?
Yes.
Right. When the war started in Germany, were you able to keep in touch with any of the relatives back in Germany?
Yes.
How did you do that?
By mail once the United States entered the war, there was no communication. But until then, there was communication.
Had they stayed in their homes? Were they able to stay in their homes, or?
Well, until they were evicted by the Gestapo.
Okay. All right. Do you want to tell us what you know about what happened to them and tell me their names?
Yeah, except for two of my uncle and my aunt who went to Palestine and Argentina, the rest of the family, and a cousin that was born in 1938 were all evicted from their house in Dorsten and put on trains and evicted to Riga,
Riga?
in Latvia, where they were interned and eventually, except for 2 uncles, killed. This included my grandparents, an uncle, 3 uncles, 2 of which survived. My my 5-year-old cousin, they were all killed. 2 uncles survived. My one uncle, wrote a letter to his sister in Argentina describing what the family went through in Riga. And I have a copy of that article, which was published in the German Jewish newspaper in Buenos Aires, which described what happened to the family in Riga and what happened to them after they were, towards the end of the war, taken out of Riga and forced marched and through several different areas, were eventually rescued by the Swedish Red Cross and taken to Sweden, where my uncle wrote this article for the German Jewish newspaper in Buenos Aires. And the article is called "The Letter from Riga." My parents were able to get both my uncles to the United States eventually, after they spent some months in Sweden recuperating from their ordeal. One of my uncles met a woman in Sweden, where she was a Auschwitz survivor, and they married in Sweden and eventually came to the United States.
Can you tell me what your father was doing for a living when he came to America?
Yeah. Well, my father, what he did and he was looking for a job. Of course, we were still in the heights of the Depression, so jobs were almost impossible to get. So the only thing that he could do at that point was to try to sell German sausages to the German Jewish community in the Philadelphia area. So he knew of a German butcher in New York who made German-style sausages, and he met with him, and he imported the sausages and sold sausages to the German Jewish community in Philadelphia. And he did this until probably 1941 or 42. Once the United States entered the war, then jobs were more plentiful for butchers, and then he was able to get a job as a butcher in a meat market, in a meat packing place.
Okay. Did your father learn English?
He did, but haltingly. He spoke, but German was his first language.
And your mother, how did she do with her English?
Not the same.
Yeah.
Actually, she was a little better than my father.
Did they get involved with the German Jewish community?
Yes. Yes, the German Jewish community started a synagogue called Tikva Chadoshu, and they also started a club called the Central Club, where many of the German Jews belonged as a social club, and they became more assimilated to the States. So they had many German Jewish friends in Philadelphia.
Okay. Tell me, do you know, were you involved as a child? Were there young people doing activities with the German Jewish Club?
Yes, they were, but generally they were older than I was at the time.
Mhm.
But I got involved peripherally with one of my cousins who was involved in the club, and whenever they had some kind of an outing, she would always invite me to come along.
Did you attend Hebrew school, Sunday school, any?
Yes, I attended Sunday school. One of my father's cousin was a teacher in KI, which was a Reform synagogue in Philadelphia.
Mhm.
So I attended Sunday school there. And there was also a German-Jewish synagogue, German-Jewish synagogue called Tikva Chadosha, which we belonged to, which was an Orthodox synagogue. But I became bar mitzvahed at KI in Philadelphia.
Okay. Describe your bar mitzvah for me. What do you remember? Was it, I'm looking at the timing, it was like at the beginning of the war, and trying to imagine how that looked at the time, and if you were, if there was anti-German feeling in the community.
Not that I can recall, because we dealt with other people in the same situations as we were. So our friends were German Jews that had immigrated here.
And at school, you weren't hearing anything or feeling any
No.
problems? Okay, that's great. All right, and did you finish your Jewish education at Bar Mitzvah, or did you continue?
We finished it at Bar Mitzvah.
All right, and socially, what were your activities? Did you go on vacations? Did you participate in any partying? What did the community do?
Well, during the summer vacations, I was given free access to a summer camp, actually 2 different ones. So that was very useful for me because it was these are Jewish camps. So I met other Jewish kids, spoke English, and probably learned my best English in those camps.
They did a good job.
Yes.
All right, can you tell me about the rest of your education?
Yeah, I graduated high school, and I always was interested in engineering, electrical engineering. My parents could not afford to send me to a college, so the question was how can I get a college education? And the only way that I could figure it out was to do it at night. So I worked during the day, and I went to school at night at Drexel.
What kind of jobs did you do?
Well, while I was in high school, I worked for the Penn Fruit Company, which is a supermarket. I worked in the deli department, then I worked in the meat department, kept the trade.
Sure.
And I did that while I worked during the day, went to school at night. So I did that until, let's see. I'm trying to recall the dates here. I graduated in 1953 from that diploma, so probably until 1950 I worked for the Penn Fruit. Then in 1950 I was able to get a job as a technician with a electronics company. So I gave up my butchering career at the Penn Fruit, took a cut in salary, and worked for the International Resistance Company, which made electronic components. And I started there in 1950. So that was a good break for me because there I could work and still continue school. Actually, they gave me some money to help extend school. And I worked for them from 1950 to 1968. And by the time I left them, I was chief engineer of the company. So I worked myself up through from a technician to engineer to manager to chief engineer.
made you become interested in electrical engineering? Because obviously no one in your family was in the science fields.
I guess it was the radio. I took the radio apart, much to my father's chagrin. I took the radio apart one day while I was listening to the war news, and they couldn't get it back together again. He never forgave me for that.
I can understand that. Okay, so you were, after, you said till 95 you were with that company? Is that one?
Until I was with it till 1965.
65, I'm sorry. Okay, so after 65, where did you work?
And after 65, I went in business for myself. I became a consultant. I was a consultant, engineering consultant for a couple of licensees of the company. And then later on, I was manufacturer's representative for them, and then also was a representative for an electronic instrument company called Teradyne. I represented their products in the part of the United States.
Did you get to travel a lot?
Yes.
Where did you go? Did you ever go back to Europe?
Yes, I represented an Italian company and went to Italy probably 2 or 3 times a year, and to some of the other countries as well, Denmark and Portugal.
Did you ever experience any anti-Semitism professionally?
Not personal, no. The only thing that I can remember, which sticks in my mind, and I can't remember the year, but it may have been during the one of the wars with Israel, may have been the Yom Kippur War. I was at RCA in an office, and I could hear conversation in a neighboring office, and they were making fun of Israel fighting in the Yom Kippur War. And that stuck in my mind, that here was anti-Semitism at RCA, essentially a Jewish company.
Yeah. You never know.
Yep.
Okay. Can you tell me how long your parents lived and if they stayed in Philadelphia?
Yeah. My father died at the age of 87. My mother died at the age of 90. Lived in Philadelphia.
Okay. And did you stay in Philadelphia also?
Until I got married. I got married in 1965, and we lived in outside of Philadelphia.
And your bride's name?
Sheila Bender Stern.
Okay. All right. And so you were living. You got married. I'm sorry. What year was it?
We got married in 1965.
65. Same year you left the other company.
I left the other company in 1968.
Okay. All right. And I just want to get the timeline right. And so where did you and your wife live?
Originally, we lived near Hatboro. I can't remember the name of the town. It's outside of Hatboro, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, my wife was a teacher in Northampton, Northampton South, one of the townships around there.
What did she teach?
Kindergarten, first grade, elementary school.
Okay. And how long did you live there? Where did you go next?
We lived there until 1968. And we moved to Cinnaminson.
Cinnaminson, New Jersey.
Mm.
And what brought you to Cinnaminson, New Jersey?
Actually, I was familiar with the houses as they were being built, and I was impressed with the workmanship. My parents were also looking for another house, and somehow we wound up looking at the houses here. So that impressed me, and also one of the people that I was working with in Philadelphia lived here, and talking with him, seeing his house. So we looked around and decided this was a good place to live. Good school system, the houses were less expensive here than in the Philadelphia area, outside the area.
And you continued to be a consultant.
No, at that time, I still worked in Philadelphia. In 1965 to 68, I commuted to Philadelphia from here.
And after that, you were a consultant.
Right.
Did you work from home or did you have an office?
I worked from home.
All right. And can you tell me about your family, your children?
Yeah, I have two daughters. Oldest daughter is Julie. She went to school in Cinnaminson and went to college at New Jersey State School.
Rutgers.
Rutgers. Actually went to one of the schools of Rutgers. Well, it wasn't. Then she went to Northwestern to medical school, and she's a pediatric oncologist. My other daughter is Lauren, who you've met, who also graduated from Cinnaminson High School. She went to school at the University of New Hampshire and got a master's degree at Temple University as a
We'll come back to it. I promise.
Child life specialist.
A what?
Child life specialist.
Child life specialist. Okay. Much like her mother.
Yeah.
Her mother was also an educator.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I would like to know how you feel that your Holocaust experience and that of your family has affected your life.
I think it basically has affected me grossly, very much so, because over the years, I came to the sad conclusion of what happened in Germany could easily happen here. And I see no way of preventing it. Historically, this has been the Jewish history. This has been the Jewish outcome. And I feel not responsible, but sad that my children and grandchildren will also have to endure this. I keep looking for hopeful signs, but I don't see any.
At what point did you tell your daughters about your life before coming to America?
I don't ever remember any particular incident. I think it was just normal conversations. Also the fact that my mother was alive when both my children were around, and they communicated with my grandmother. This is my mother's mother.
Mm-hmm.
My mother.
Your mother, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
and by this time, your mother could speak English well
yeah,
enough.
well
Yes.
enough they
Yeah.
could communicate.
Okay.
And both my daughters took German in school, but the way languages were taught in the United States is not very good.
No.
But they also made it a strong effort to be aware of my background by signing up for an exchange program with a German school between a Cinnaminson school and a German school, so they spent a couple of weeks in Germany visiting a German family and attending the school there. So they did this knowing my background. So
How'd you feel about them going back in Germany? Do you feel, were you nervous about any danger, any?
no, I didn't, because we knew the people involved.
Okay. All right.
Now, they also visited my hometown. They visited Bigger,
Mhm.
and they made friends there.
There were no family members left there,
No.
of course. Did they get to see the meet?
Yes, they went to my hometown, went to Bigger. They visited the cemetery, visited the Jewish cemetery there.
Okay.
And one of the people that they met, I don't know how many years ago this is now, we still communicate with him a number of times during the year. He attends all the family functions. He's not Jewish, but lives in Berlin. He speaks English better than I do. He's like a family member.
Mhm. Yeah, English and Holocaust education are both mandatory in
Yes.
Germany, so yeah, they're very knowledgeable.
Well, we visited, the whole family visited Germany I'm losing track of the dates now, on our 50th wedding anniversary. And I was married in 1965, so it makes it 2015, 8 years ago. We were on a wedding trip, and we visited my hometown. And coincidentally, with our visit, it was not pre-planned, just happened to be an incident. The town had an exhibition called "The Jews of Bigger," where the children of the elementary school and middle school made an exhibition showing the life of the Jewish families in Bigger, and they had pictures and history of all the families that lived in Bigger and what happened to them, where they went and where they were killed. It was a very emotional presentation, and it just happened to be, it was a complete coincidence that we were there at that time of the opening of that exhibition. So while we were there, the day that we arrived, they had a meeting. They had all the townspeople met at the city hall. The mayor greeted us, the entire family. We went to the city hall, to the big conference room, which was filled with people from the town and students, where they gave speeches in our behalf. And prior to the opening of the exhibition, there were newspaper people there, TV people. So we were honored guests. And what was noteworthy, I can't say frightening, was maybe a little bit shocking, after the mayor and the principal and people gave their speeches in German, the mayor turned to me and introduced me as also having a few words to say in German. No, I had not spoken German for a while. So I drew my limited, well, I said, I still have more than a limited German, could still speak some German, but I also counted on my friend from Berlin to help me out in case I got stuck. So I gave a little talk in German about my experiences in Germany and here. And then we met with the children from the school and the townspeople. And at that time, I also met a man who claims, I say claims because I have no recollection of this, that he was the only student of the school in the school who would sit next to me because I was Jewish. And so we have pictures of this. We have a TV program of this. So this was quite an event for us. And I was asked to sign what they call the Golden Book, or the important visitors. I was called an important visitor. Are registered in the Golden Book of the town.
You want to tell me about if there was a Stolperstein placed?
Yes. I was told that there would be Stolperstein placed, and they tried to arrange it while we were there, but unfortunately it was not available, was not possible at that time, but it was done later. And I have pictures of it, of the placement of Stolperstein with the townspeople showing it. And I have the pictures of the Stolperstein in front of our house with our names on it. So I have pictures of that.
It's a very nice honor.
You know, there's one other incident which I think is important to me. That after in the First World War, I mentioned the 4 brothers all served in the German army. 2 of my uncles were killed, and another uncle was wounded and honored with the Iron Cross. So after the First World War, a monument was erected in the town with the names of all the men that were killed in the First World War, which included my 2 uncles. When Hitler came into power, the town was ordered to remove my uncle's names from the monument. And I was told at the time that the first stonemason that was asked to remove the names refused to do that. And then he was replaced, and somebody else did that, removed my uncle's names. After the Second World War, a new monument was erected, which we saw, which replaced my uncle's name.
Wow.
So we saw that. Also, after the war, they made monuments for all of the Jewish people that lived in the town that were killed in the camps, were killed by the Germans, were killed by the Gestapo, with where they lived, where they went, where they were killed, and when they were killed. These monuments are in the cemetery, in the Christian cemetery. And when we inquired why in the Christian cemetery and not in the Jewish cemetery, we were told there are no visitors to the Jewish cemetery, but there are visitors to the Christian cemetery, and it is important for them to see what happened. There was also a monument in the place where the synagogue stood, which was burnt down during Kristallnacht. So I have a copy of the film of the monument for the cemetery. There's also a monument for the Jewish school, which the building survived Kristallnacht because they could not burn that down because of fear that a neighboring house could have caught fire. But after the war, that was destroyed.
Do you recall, or can you list for us the family members who were killed?
I remember one, a girl in my class, Hildegard. She, I think, was a year older than me. We went to school together. She was killed in Auschwitz. I'd heard about this after the war. I received a letter by means of my cousin who lived in California at the time. They had his address, didn't have my address. That there was a reunion of the school, of the class where I attended, and they did not know my address. And they asked my cousin to get a hold of me, to contact me, to let me know that there was this reunion in Germany to which I was invited, and also to let them know if I knew where my friend Hildegard was. I couldn't respond. I knew what happened. I couldn't respond. I did find out later, I went actually from our trip back to Germany, that another friend Jewish friend from the school, Werner Frankenberg, whose family emigrated to Chile, that he did attend the reunion.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know it at the time, but he went from Chile to Israel, and he's now deceased.
Do you keep in touch with anybody else?
No.
Okay. Now, you were married into an American family.
Yes.
How is it different than your German family?
I was a foreigner. I'm joking.
Okay. But they accepted you as, you know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I not only was German, but also I was a Reformed Jew. my in-laws were conservative,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
and actually my grandmother was Orthodox, though my father was not.
Can you tell me if there's anything we have not talked about that you would like to talk about today?
Yeah, there is one other history that was written by my cousin, who lived in Bigger, who went to California, lived in Philadelphia, Vineland, in California, who wrote an essay on what happened to his parents, which is my aunt and uncle, and the uncle that was in business with my father. They, as I said, they lived in Bigger. They lived very close to our house. My uncle and aunt also had visas to emigrate to the United States. My cousin wrote an essay on what happened to them before they were able to get out of Germany. And I have a copy of this essay, which I would like to you to have and to read and to put into the archives. But what happened to my uncle and to my aunt, just briefly, is that before they could leave Bigger, in the middle of the night, the police and the Gestapo came to my uncle's house, woke him up in the middle of the night, brought him down to the living quarter, put him into a chair, doused him with cold water, beat him up. My cousin, who was probably 10 or 11 at the time, no, it was maybe 12, woke up. He could hear what was happening. He could hear his mother crying. They started to interrogate my uncle, beat him, and then took him away, arrested him, leaving my aunt and my cousin. So this whole episode is written up by my cousin. But to kind of condense things, what happened, my aunt got a hold of some people to find out where they had taken my uncle, where they had arrested him, where they had jailed him. And by means of some other people that she knew, she was able to find out where he was, and made through some inquiries and through some contacts, found out how she could possibly get him released. And bribery was not unknown at the time. So at that time, she found out that she could get him released by giving the warden or the jailers something like $600 American. I don't remember the exact amount, but it's something like that. Of course, she did not have the money, but she contacted our relatives in the United States and explained what happened. Now, this is 1938. They forwarded the money to him. my aunt, through various contacts, was able to get my uncle released, took him home. At the time, she had already arranged for the movers to move all of their belongings, to crate them up to send to the United States. They had exit visas. The movers came. My uncle was released. He was home. They rolled my uncle in a rug so that he would not be recognized. The movers moved the furniture and the rug into the moving van. Gestapo came to the house and said to my aunt and to the movers, "You can't take these. These belongings belong to the state, not to the Jews." And the movers said, "No, they don't. I arranged to acquire all of these. These belong to mine. I have proof that these are mine." And at that point, they said, "Okay." So all of these things were moved into the van by the mover. My aunt and my uncle were then taken out, and through various towns and cities, they eventually wound up in Hamburg and Bremen, and got onto a German boat, and then came to the United States.
On a German boat?
On a German boat.
Wow.
Through Hamburg. Okay. And this whole episode was written up by my cousin.
I forgot to ask earlier who signed your affidavit to sponsor you.
There were two families, the Eichwalds and the Goodfriends. These were the children of my grandmother's sisters.
Okay.
So they were family well-to-do. My grandmother family were Meyerhoffs, which was a long-established family in Germany, as here as well. So there was a good bit of money behind them. So they sponsored us. I can't say that they were gracious about it, but they saw the need. We kind of lost contact with them. We were known, and I hated the word ever since, they were known as the refugees.
They were known as the refugees?
We were known as the refugees.
Yes. Okay, and they'd only been here a few years more than you.
No, they were born here.
Oh, okay.
They were born here.
Okay. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I want to thank my family for all the things that they have done for, not just for me, but for the entire family, for keeping our history alive, for my daughters, for continuing to be interested and it's more than interest, to just be part of me. I'm especially blessed with Lauren, who lives close to me, who spends a lot of time in my house, in our house. And of course my wife, without whom I could not exist.
I think we're going to bring them on and introduce them. Fred, would you like to introduce your family to us?
Yes.
I'm over
First and foremost, my wife, who stuck with me for how many years?
58, dear.
58 years.
But who's counting?
And her name?
Through thick and thin, she's been by my side forever.
Would you like to say who I am?
This is my
Wife.
Can you remember my name?
my wife, Sheila Janet Bender Stern,
Wow, it's the whole of Megillah.
who
Okay.
I
Now,
love
would you like
more
to-
than I can say.
Well, I am his wife of many years, and I would like to tell the world what a wonderful guy he is. Not only has he been a fabulous father, he's been a wonderful husband. And mostly, I'm at this moment proud of him for doing this because this is not an easy task. Recalling all of the dates and all of the incidents that all of this brings up is not easy for any of us. And the fact that he was able to do it and do it so well just sort of is a testament to the character and the intellect that he still has at this age, which in and of itself is a real tribute. And I do love him more than I can say.
Would you like to introduce your daughter?
This is my youngest daughter, who graduated from the University of Massachusetts, not New Hampshire.
It's close.
She's a child life specialist and has a very responsible position
Thank you, Dad.
at the Voorhees Pediatric Center, who on a daily basis does a job that I could not do for 5 minutes, taking care of severely fragile children. This is my daughter, Lauren Sue. Stern
No,
Wait.
the other way.
Stern Wait.
Yeah, Dad.
Lauren, would you like to say anything? Do you want to say something to that?
I'm trying.
And maybe start by talking about your children.
All right, that's easy to do. So I have 2 children, Sarah, who is 28, and Rachel, who is 26. And they love you very much, as so do I. And we spend lots of time together and share lots of stories. And I am who I am today because of you. And I have the empathy and compassion because of what you taught me. And that's how I live my life. And we spend a lot of time together, sharing stories and talking about things, current things, past things. And I'm very proud of you for who you are, how you raised me, how you raised Julie, and the example that you showed us to raise our children.
And for all the years we spent skiing together.
All the vacations, everything. I love you.
Thank you. Fred, can you tell us who is in this picture? It looks quite old.
Yes, this is my grandmother's family. In this picture is my grandmother and my grandfather, who I never knew, and their 8 children, 4 girls and 4 boys. The picture, of course, includes my father and my uncle and my 2 uncles that were killed in the First World War. They're the youngest boys in the picture.
Do you recall the names of these young uncles that were killed?
Yes, my Uncle Fritz and Uncle Louis
Stern. Thank you.
And this is a picture of my father and probably one of the workers in front of the meat market in Bickel, Germany. I don't know. This is a picture of some of the men from Bickel in the First World War who fought in the First World War for Germany. In the picture is is my uncle Julius, and he can be identified by the little ribbon in his tunic. When I sent this picture to a friend in Germany, they identified my uncle by the ribbon and the tunic, and they wrote back to me and said that ribbon indicates that he was awarded the Iron Cross in the war. Yes, these are pictures of the market, and also a history of the sale of the business. It shows my parents, my father and uncles, owners of the market, who they sold it to, and who the subsequent owners were after that. This is from the German documentation.
Can you tell me what's in this picture and what the documentation is?
Now, this is a picture of our meat market, and also as a documentation shows the ownership of the business. My father's uncle's business, who they sold it to, and who the subsequent owners were. Actually, we have a complete history of the buildings going back into the 1700s. This is something that is documented in the German archives. That's a picture of the Stern boys from Bigger. So that includes my cousin Lou, my brother Herb, he's the youngest, and the blonde, that's me. That picture was taken, obviously, in Germany. That's a picture of my father in the First World War as a soldier.
That's great.
This is my father's driver's license in Germany. My recollection is that we had two cars, not at the same time, but we had an Opel and we had a Chevy, as I remember. But this is my father's driver's license.
You had a Chevy in Germany?
I think so, yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, the translation of that Führerschein driver's license, or driver's license. That's Führerschein. This is a building permit that was issued and signed by my grandmother. This is the only signature that I have of my grandmother, and it is signed Frau Witwe Julia Stern. Witwe is widow. She was a widow at the time. And the only thing that I can gather is that the property may still have been in my grandfather's name, and that she was the heir to that property, and therefore had to sign the building permit to reconstruct the slaughterhouse that was burnt down in 1933. Yes, in order to get paid by the insurance company for rebuilding the slaughterhouse in 1933, my father needed split documentation that he was in the army, the German army, during World War I. And this is the documentation that proved that. This is proof that I was born. This is my birth certificate, July 14, 1928. Yes, this proves that I arrived into the United States legally. This is my visa, given to me in Stuttgart, Germany in 1938.
3, 2, 1.
Yeah, this is the back of the visa, which shows the date on which it was issued. I mentioned earlier that I spent some of my vacations with my uncle in Wesel, Germany. And this is a picture taken in Wesel during during a vacation, so I was probably, 8 or 9 years old at the time. This is a picture of the school that I attended in Germany while I could still go to school. I think this was pretty close to the end. And I can use my finger to identify, or long can.
Where are you in the sequence?
No, this one, the blonde, this one.
Here?
No, here. Now let me take the picture out and not show.
Should we redo this, John? Because the whole picture's not in the shot.
Pause. Redo.
This is a picture of my class in Bigger, Germany. This includes a picture of Werner Frankenberg, who's the student all the way to the right, with his hands in his back, and also Hilda Löwenstern, who's the girl to the right, and I'm the one with the, I don't know, called the lederhosen, kind of the blonde kid that looks like an Aryan. So this was my class. This was probably the last class picture taken. And in the back, this is a sign that was on the outskirts of a neighboring town. The neighboring town was Olsberg. Actually, Bigger and Olsberg have now combined. But this sign says, "Jews, don't stop here. Keep moving. Get out of here." And words to that effect. Jews do not stop here. It was typical in Germany that on Rosh Hashanah, New Year's, the Jewish New Year's, you wrote a message to your parents and to your grandparents, wishing them a happy New Year and promising that you're going to be a good boy for the coming year. So you wrote this in German, also you wrote it in Hebrew. Does that picture show it both ways, Lauren? This is a New Year's greeting to my parents and my grandparents. So every Rosh Hashanah you wrote a message wishing them a good year, a healthy year, and promising you're going to be a good boy.
And it was in German, and you wrote
And Hebrew.
And you wrote the Hebrew yourself.
Yes.
Thank you.
This is the passenger list of the New Amsterdam, showing the listing of my father, my grandmother, and my name on the passenger list,
And the date of departure.
and the date on the name of the boat. This just shows our names on the passenger list. These are pictures of the early years of Fred from 1928 to 1938.
And when did you receive this? What was the occasion?
You were 70.
My 70th birthday. My uncle made this on my 70th. Is it 70th?
When you were 70.
Okay. So these.
Okay.
Awesome, yeah.
This is a picture of my grandmother, my father, and myself on the boat on the way over. Again, this is a picture of my grandmother, my father, and myself in the boat, in the coat to which I hope to go into.
Okay.
Picture of my father and me on the boat over. These are the Stolpersteine, which were a place in front of our house showing my parents' name and my brother and my name. My mother was golden. Her family was everything. Nothing was too much for her. She did everything. She took care of the children. She took care of my father after he had his stroke. She took care of him at home. And yet, she was the only one of her family for a long time in the United States. The rest of her family either perished or was unknown at that time. Eventually, her two brothers came to the United States, so she did then have some family here. But for the longest time, she was the only one of her family in the United States. And my brother and I and my father, they were it. She was golden. She lived a full life. She did everything for other people, for everybody else. She took care of my grandmother when she got sick. She loved my wife. She loved her grandchildren. And she lived until she was 90. But she missed her parents, that I know, because she had to leave them for an unknown fate when she left them in 1938 in November of 1938.
Thank you.
My cousin Judith was born in 1938. We were already in the United States, and this is a picture of her as an infant with my maternal grandfather. They lived in Dorsten until they were evicted by the Nazis. There are other pictures of Judith.
What happened to them?
Judith and her mother, my Aunt Hilda, and my Uncle Max, her father, and my grandparents, my Uncle Walter, my Uncle Ernst, my Uncle Max, were all picked up by the Nazis in 1942, in January of 1942, and transported to Riga. My grandparents, my Uncle Walter, eventually died in Riga. My Uncle Ernst, my Uncle Max remained in Riga until towards the end of the war, when they were forced marched out of Riga. My Aunt Hilda, which is Judith's mother, was transported to an extermination camp in I can't remember the name, which left my cousin Judith with her father and uncle. Eventually, they were transported, which left my cousin Judith alone in Riga until 1942, 1943, when we are not certain what became of her, but my uncle thinks that she was picked up from Riga and sent to Auschwitz. My cousin Judith will always be remembered, because there are very few other people that would remember her. Her mother was killed. Her father, what did survive, and eventually remarried here. Her grandparents, her paternal grandparents were killed in Riga. Her uncle Walter was killed in Riga. The picture on the left is my Aunt Hilda and my Uncle Max and my cousin Judas. Judas is remembered by me every Kristallnacht. My Aunt Hilda was killed in the Holocaust. My uncle did survive. The picture on the right also shows a picture of my uncle and aunt and cousin Judas before they were transported to Riga. This is a picture of my cousin Judas with her grandparents, my grandfather Julius and grandmother Sarah, both of which died in Riga. My grandfather hardly survived the transport from Dorsten to Riga. From what my uncle was saying, he essentially went into shock and during the transport to Riga, and they died soon after. In Riga. This is my Uncle Albert and Aunt Elsa, who I mentioned earlier I spent many vacations with, and a picture of my cousin. I'm sorry, I can't see who that is.
Your aunt and uncle?
Oh, is there somebody else in the picture?
No.
Okay, this is my aunt and uncle. They're on their wedding day. My aunt is dressed with a black wedding gown because her mother had just died. My aunt and uncle both went to Palestine in 1938 and resided there. I visited them in right after the war, 1948, I guess it was. They helped build the country of Israel. They helped build the country. They worked the farms. But they were the Metzger survivors, my Uncle Albert and my Aunt Elsa Metzger.
Thank you.
I wanted to.
What?
One second.
Mrs. Stern has some additional comments that she would like to add today. So go, please.
Okay. I was so happy that Fred was able to show the picture of his mother. One of the things that impressed me the most about the Stern family was that my father-in-law had the foresight and the ability to bring his family and his mother and his brother and whoever else came out of Germany. He could see what was happening before it actually happened. And he was able to do it in a way that allowed everyone that he could get out to live as full a life as they possibly could. The other thing that I, as an outsider, so to speak, want to mention is that from my perspective, how everyone was able to go on and build a life and create this wonderful, warm, accepting family that they were able to build it's remarkable. I mean, it is a testament to their fortitude, resilience, and their strength. And so I think that's really very, I don't want to say this, it really needs to be remarked upon. It really needs to be said, and it needs to be taken into account of the entire story of the Holocaust.
And that's why we document it.
And that's why we document it. And I'm so glad that we're doing this.
Thank you.